Now, there is this issue of tariffs, both in the election as well as a debate within the Republican Party, as well as, and this is a topic I hit on in my book a little bit as well. What are we to make of Donald Trump's position on tariffs if you're approaching this with a more libertarian leaning mindset? Here's my view. So actually, there's a distinction between Donald Trump and the protectionist direction of certain segments, at least of the new right. Donald Trump is actually very much a pragmatist on this, and that's what people need to understand. This idea, if you get too philosophical about just looking at this from the clouds without looking at the pragmatic details, you miss what's actually happening. What Donald Trump has said is, and this is something that I actually think is very reasonable, I favor it, is that if another country is applying tariffs on our goods, then we have to apply that same standard to them. That's different than saying that in a vacuum, we have to suddenly raise tariffs when nobody else is. That's about saying that we have to be competing on an even playing field. So we can't sit in this blithe neoliberal mythology that just says that, okay, we're going to pretend like the rest of the world and their behaviors don't matter for us, but we're going to pretend that we still live in a Friedmanite, Hayek, Vivek style idealized free market when that free market doesn't exist. If other countries are applying those tariffs to the United States of America, we got to be in a position to apply the same in return. That's a different position from saying that we need to adopt a strictly protectionist position for U.S. manufacturers ahead of other countries doing the same. So one of the things you saw in Trump's first term, and people need to understand this as a take-home message, is many of those tariff threats that he made, we didn't actually even have to follow through on many of them because the other countries immediately came to the negotiating table afterwards. It was an effective tactic even with respect to other issues like illegal mass migration into the country, leverage for actually Mexico's cooperation with us for the Remain in Mexico policy, which is one of the most successful policies even on halting the effects of mass illegal migration into the country. That, I think, is a sensible approach of using leverage to accomplish objectives to make sure we're competing on a level playing field, which is different than the direction that some in the movement now take that and run with to say, okay, well, we don't really care about whether or not we're benefiting from our relationships with other allies, economically speaking, that we just need to make sure that we are protecting American manufacturers from the effects of foreign competition. And I think that is a, even if understandable impulse, I think a more self-harming direction for American workers and manufacturers, above all, to actually go in the long run. So I think it's important to draw that distinction of using the ability for an even playing field as a lever to ensure that we have an even playing field versus a willy-nilly protectionist direction. There's a distinction, and I don't think that it is fair to those who try to characterize Donald Trump in that purely protectionist camp. That's not exactly what he's doing. He's a businessman. He's pragmatic. And I think that's a far more understandable and rational approach than, I think some on the right may otherwise want to take it in the future.